Welcome to the Time Management Podcast with me, your host, Abigail Barnes. I'm a productivity coach, global speaker, time management author, and award-winning entrepreneur on a mission to share the 888 formula with the world and to remind you that it's your time. Leave it to me to bring you new time management tips, tricks, tools, and strategies, to introduce you to guests, research, and case studies from around the world, and to give you a simple 5-step process you can follow to uplevel your productivity, achieve your goals, and create a life that exceeds your wildest dreams. I'm so excited that you're here, so let's get started. Welcome to the show. I cannot tell you how excited I am for this week's episode and this week's special guest, Ira Kiourti. She is here to talk to us about all things astrology. Ira, welcome to the show.
So thrilled to be here. Thank you, Abigail. Fan of the show. So let's get started. What do you want to know?
I'm so excited. Let's just dive straight in. Who is Ira Kiourti in a nutshell?
Doctor of Philosophy, a long time practitioner of astrology since the age of 12. And I suppose also an artist. I've done art all my life. I think that's it. I'm a lifelong seeker of meaning, essentially. I like to find meaning in our experience, in the human journey, our interrelationships, and of course the world. Like, wow, what is this place we're in? So yeah, that's it.
The playground that we get to call home.
Yeah.
Let's start here. What was your relationship like with time in the past?
I've always been puzzled by time. And that's what's led to the journey I'm on. When I was a child, I had a very strict nanny, and I lived like a soldier with no kind of ability for freedom until the age of 10. So then when that kind of rigid schedule was removed, I was just kind of lost in time. So I'm still struggling sometimes with time. I think the main thing and why I study astrology is to understand the quality of time, because time is not just a quantity, it's a quality. And anyone who's been in any kind of creative pursuit will know that 5 hours can pass in 5 minutes, and like waiting for a coffee to be made could be like feel forever, So time has a quality. And there's many layers to this statement, but I was fascinated with studying the quality of time and with understanding my own personal relation with time, and to time and astrology can help with that. And for example, because I realized that that we all have a rhythm. And we all force ourselves to fit into the rhythm of the world, and we must to some degree, right, to function. But there's also a natural rhythm. I mean, there's the day and night, there's the cycles, and there's also an inner clock, and an inner natural rhythm, which we must follow. So all of these interplay. And in my case, for example, I found that I could be really diligent and good and do everything in the rhythm that I'm supposed to and be really productive. But to be creative, I needed to follow my own rhythm. I'm fascinated by time and our relation to it.
I'm so excited to unpack this conversation. And I love that concept there about following and finding your own rhythm when it comes to time. So important. Let's start with, what is astrology?
A few answers to this. On a very basic level, astrology is a rich symbolic language for understanding ourselves and the world. It's like a model of the world. In another sense, I mean, the zodiac is a giant clock. We have 12 signs, 12 houses, 12 hours, 12 months. It's the giant clock in the sky, essentially. And through that, you try to understand, as I said, the quality of time. And a third thing to really put in here, which is essential. Astrology is an art, not a science. And in my time, obviously, in philosophy, there are articles out there arguing that astrology is a pseudoscience. It's not a science. So by definition, it is not a pseudoscience. It is an art. And I'm surprised that people know so little about it. I mean, it was built into the philosophies of Plato and Aristotle. Even Ptolemy, back in the 1st century AD, made the distinction between astronomy as a science with his Almagest and astrology as an art with his the Trabiblos. So there's a huge misunderstandings around the topic.
Let's go a little bit deeper into that then. So when and where did it originate from?
Okay, let's say the earliest records are arguably around the 3rd millennium BC in Mesopotamia, Sumeria, which is modern-day Iraq, that area down there, where civilization started, modern civilization. The earliest definitive record is around the 18th century BC, and Nicholas Campion, in his book about the history of astrology, I think argues, it's a convincing argument that really as soon as humans existed and they looked up in the sky to try to understand anything at all, astrology was born. So the basic thing is that it was started in Mesopotamia or Babylon, down in modern day Iraq, then was brought over, with Alexander the Great, who reached Babylon. All this kind of tradition was brought over to the Hellenistic world. And then it was totally Hellenized. Zodiac is a Greek word, which means, you could say it means circle of the animals, but Zoe is also life. It's literally the circle of life. And it spread from there. It was lost for a while, and the Arabs picked it up, the Persians translated Greek text, and then it made its way into medieval Christian world. The scholars back then were obviously the Christians. And then slowly, you have, for example, Queen Elizabeth had John Dee very famously draw up the charts of herself and Mary. And then after that, it's very famous. Then we have William Lilly, also a Brit, very famous astrologer of the times, who helped the parliamentarians win the war against the supporters of the king, Charles, back then. So it's a long, long journey, and then it's reached the modern world. You have people like Alan Leo and Dane Ruggiero kind of psychologizing it more and making it more about understanding ourselves rather than predictions. And then, of course, you have the media popularizing it. Popularity will bring more people being interested in it. And of course, Britain has a long tradition of very, very intelligent people teaching, writing, holding conferences, and America, I'm sure in other places, but I live in Britain.
So you've mentioned a few, but over the years, over the centuries, different rulers, different leaders have used astrology. Who are the key ones that stand out for you historically?
Right. I mean, this is rumors. I can't say that I'm a specialist. I think Elizabeth is definitely one. Obviously, there was this sort of scandal with Nancy Reagan bringing astrologers to the house, with Ronald Reagan having to deny these kind of allegations. The myth with Alexander the Great is about the Chaldeans back there, the scholars of Babylon kind of having this prediction that if he enters Babylon, he's going to die. And from what I understand, he was scared and he didn't do it. And then people, various philosophers and rationalists came and said, oh my God, how can you listen to this stuff? And eventually convinced him with rational argument to enter the city where he died. So, that is the story. But no, you have many leaders. You have Roman emperors. I think Tiberius in the 1st century AD was the first reportedly to have had one. It's a well-kept secret. The most fascinating figure is J.P. Morgan, who even commissioned a special clock that showed him the movements of the heavens. And I've seen pictures of this on the internet. Anyone can search this. And he's reputed to have said, millionaires do not use astrology, billionaires do. Many people, it's a well-kept secret, I think. And obviously, when something is powerful, you vilify it.
I am loving this. And I also love your knowledge. And it's just so incredible to have you on the podcast. I'm really, really grateful for your time and the wisdom that you're sharing. You said at the beginning that you started to learn astrology when you were the age of 12. How on earth did you come to this?
Yes. One could say I came to this world to do this. I didn't really have much of a choice. At the age of 12, my parents divorced, and I had no relationship with my mum up to that point. So she asked advice what to do to connect with me, and the therapist said, take her to a class, and she took me to astrology classes. And I was 12, and I had my first chart done. And what happened to me in that class, I don't know if it was meant to be, but what happened to me was that I came alive. When you study astrology, you study symbols, and back then there were no computers, right? Because I have a very mathematical mind. I love figures and drawing charts, and I was artistic. So what you do is you look at books and you create this circle, and you look at tables of where the planets are, and you insert them in the circle, and then their geometrical aspects and everything. You can fill it with colors, and I was fascinated. And also, when you study the zodiac and the planets, you study myths, essentially, like the myth of Venus. What the goddess myths are like. The hero's journey. It's just like such a rich experience. I was hooked. I could never. It's like having biting into the apple of Eden. could just never go back. Life is so much richer with it. So that's what happened to me. To complete, I suppose, the journey, I've been practicing. Obviously, you grow when you're 12. What do you know when you're 12? It's just the pure enthusiasm. You grow. I've been doing charts and practicing. And then I went to study at the Center for Psychological Astrology with Liz Green and Charles Harvey back then, and got a certificate. And then I did some other stuff. Then I did philosophy, and I thought, okay, now I'm doing something serious and proper. And then I couldn't let go of the astrology. And so I went to the Faculty of Astrological Studies and did their quite difficult diploma there. And I've just been doing charts ever since, but it's literally at a later age where I thought, okay, this is not letting me be. I just, that's it. I'll be an astrologer. I'll do it professionally.
And isn't that the way that it goes in life in general when somebody has a talent? And obviously, let's not overlook the fact that you have a gift, but you have nurtured that gift, you have educated that gift, you have gone on the journey to learn more and more and gone deeper and deeper and deeper in it. Again, so grateful to have you in my life and so grateful to call you my personal astrologer, helping me to understand the cycles of the planets and how that can impact everything. Before we go on to the next section, I just want to continue and finalize in laying this foundation, the difference between astronomy, astrology, and then the crossover of how they are actually interrelated.
Good points. So astronomy is a science that's measurements which are objective. You measure the location of the planets. I mean, I'm not an astronomer. I'm not going to give you much on the topic, but I like to observe the night sky and understand some basic things, like, for example, that the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun, is at an angle to the equator and how that creates the seasons and everything. That's astronomical knowledge. I mean, very basic, I suppose. So it is a science. It's verifiable, objective. Lots of measurements will give you the same result. Astrology is an art in the sense that you take these facts presented by the science and then you apply the art of interpretation. I mean, people might balk at this, but medicine isn't a science either, Physics is and biology, but each person is unique and individual, and you need a holistic approach to understand the sign and signals of the body. I'm sure you know that. So this is my view anyway. There is the art of interpretation. There is the art of understanding, and the result will be as good as the practitioner, to a large degree. The other problem with astrology is you can't have a repeatable experiment. I mean, the skies change all the time. People are all individual. There's been studies of twins, but even there you see how two people, you can see the whole chart of the twin, but two people, it's like a script or a play that choose to play different actors in it. So it's an art. So you take the facts, you apply them to create the map you're working from. You will always come up with the same map. And you can change the systems, but the systems are consistent. It's a consistent system. And whatever language you choose to apply in interpretation, it's a consistent language. That's what makes it not like just make-believe. There's an internal consistency to the model you're using, to the language, the meaning of the words. They don't just mean anything. Not anything goes. But then you apply the art of interpretation.
I guess what I'm hearing you say is that astronomy is the study of the movement of the galaxy, and then astrology is the story that this can tell. And every story is individual based on whose chart is being studied. I love it.
Yeah, and even who's interpreting, right, to some degree.
How can knowing our astrology save us time?
Okay, that's a deep question. Two ways. So I don't know if I would call it, yes, it saves you time, but in the grand scheme of things, perhaps if you studied, you might spend some time studying it. First of all, know thyself, the age-old maxim. Very important to know oneself, to know where not to go and where you would thrive and shine, what will bring you joy and pleasure, what role in the world, would fulfill you most. These things you can see in the chart. Even how you handle time and daily existence. Some people are more fluid, others need a rigid schedule. So know thyself. And the other one is know the times you live in. It's like knowing the weather, knowing the seasons. You know, summer is coming, you know, winter is coming, you prepare for it, you know, it's going to rain, you don't go out. Very, very simple stuff. Understand yourself and understand your place in space time and how to flow best with what's going on out there.
I have got so many more questions to ask, Ira. I feel like we're going to have to call this episode part one, because there is just so many things that we can continue to talk about. I would love to focus on something that tends to get a lot of airtime, but I don't feel like people truly understand it. And I didn't until you explained it. Can you talk to us about the dreaded Mercury retrograde, which seems to happen quite frequently throughout a year, and people in general use it to blame tech issues on? What even is the Mercury retrograde, and should we be fearing it as much as we are led to believe?
First of all, don't fear anything. I mean, astrology is here to help you exercise your free will, essentially, by knowing all these things I said earlier. And there's nothing to fear. This is all just life. Life happens, right? You can study it, or you can just live it and forget all this. Life has cycles, you know, life is cycles. So Mercury retrograde is just another part of a cycle. Mercury has a cycle. And I'm not going to go too deep into it, but basically what happens is the way the Earth, the Mercury, and the Sun are aligned. And I'm going to try and keep this simple. It appears, you know, as Mercury goes around faster than we do, it appears to us at some point as it overtakes us, kind of that it goes backward. I can explain that more if you want, but I don't know if people will want the technicalities. The crucial thing about this period, let's stick with the symbols rather than the astronomy. The crucial thing about it is that everything is a cycle, and Mercury represent our brain, our processing ability, our processing power, our thinking. And we can't just be automatons, just moving forward all the time. There is a time where new ideas are seeded. There is a time where they're a bit tentative and experimental, like the moon, you know, like lunar cycles. So you try them out, and you don't like sign on the dotted line there if you can help it. You just try it out. That's still like a part of the Mercury retrograde cycle. Then it starts accelerating, and you know the mind starts understanding more and more until it reaches a moment of clarity. It's a bit like the full moon. Then it starts bringing back and starting to really implement and really work with the ideas, you know, constructively, until there comes a point where you need to just wind down a little bit and start looking back at your journey to understand, to make sure to take with you everything that's gone before. And you take that with you, and you come to a moment in the Mercury retrograde cycle where the past is done and new ideas are seeded, and then you tentatively move forward again. That is 4-month cycle, roughly. Mercury retrograde lasts about 22 days. And you can think of it as the first 10 days of the Mercury retrograde cycle are the hindsight days. So start slowing down, finish whatever projects you started. Like, don't just suddenly paralyze yourself and do nothing, but just starting to looking back to understand what happened and to take all the lessons, everything you need to take forward, complete anything that you need to complete. And of course, that's also a time to pick up anything that was in the back burner, because sometimes Mercury retrograde periods can be extremely creative because the pace of life is so relentless that Mercury retrograde allows you to turn into yourself, and, you know, something that you were doing and you had no time to do when life was going, you actually take it, you know, pick it up again. So the first 10 days are hindsight, and the next 10 days are like foresight, you know, where you can't see clearly yet, but you experiment and you start. So that's why it's important to respect these cycles of nature. You know, they're cycles of nature. There's nothing really special about it in a way. And we think it's something, you know, obviously it's been popularized because, you know, whatever sells, you know, it's like, ooh, terror, Mercury retrograde. But yes, technology does glitch sometimes. And that's, you know, whenever you try to just push forward regardless, you might have glitches and things, because it's a time to turn inwards. That's all it is. It's a time to turn inwards and to tidy up loose ends and to think of new things you want to be doing rather than just pushing and pushing. Does that answer your question?
That does answer the question. I would love to know a bit more about why it's going back. Is that just, it appears to be going back? Because obviously you said Mercury is going around the sun, it's going around faster then the Earth is going around the sun. So it's just that it appears, and so then the terminology is to call it a retrograde.
Yes, it's an apparent retrograde motion. So let's say you have the Sun, Mercury, and the Earth. Let's say, this might not be exactly accurate astronomically, but the basic idea will be sound. Let's say the Earth is here. Let's assume for a minute the Earth hasn't moved much. Just because I can't move my finger. So at this point, when this finger is, I'm going to move this finger. When it's here, it's all direct. Mercury is all direct. When Mercury is on the other side of the sun, so we are here, Mercury is on the other side of the sun, right? So that appears to be direct and fast, because if you think about it, it's overtaking on the outside lane. It appears to move very fast as it does this huge circle. Then as it reaches here, it appears to station because it's about to go on the inside lane. And then it appears to go, it appears to station, go backward, station, go forward. But all it does is go around and around the sun. And we've moved a bit, obviously, during that time. It's an apparent motion. But another thing to remember is Mercury is closest to the Earth during its retrograde. It's between the Earth and the sun, especially at its inferior conjunction, it's called. This one is the superior, or from the outside lane of the sun, inferior inside lane between us and the sun. So, it is basically closest to the Earth at that point. And, that's the time when the kind of whatever this planet represents, the art of interpretation, our thinking, it's really time to just take time and think. It's very simple, really. It's very simple.
Thank you so much for explaining that. What I'm really hearing is it's all terminology, and once you understand the terminology, then you can start to understand some of the conversation. So when I would hear an astrologer talking about the astrological weather, half of it I don't actually get because I don't understand the language. So it's a process of understanding the language that you've been learning since the age of 12. Before we go into our next part of the conversation, there are 12 star signs. There are 12 houses. Every single star sign has a different personality. Every single house has a different meaning and a different story. We then have a sun sign, a moon sign, and a rising sign. And recently you taught me that every chart has a sign. So I'm a Libra sun, a Libra moon, a Scorpio rising, and my chart is a Leo. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Okay. All right. You've said it very well already. So I'm just going to clarify the final point. Every chart has a chart ruler, the captain of your ship, as it were, the captain at the wheel. And whatever else might be going on, your sun sign, your moon sign, that captain has a lot to say as to which way you're going and, weathering the storms and stuff. And that planet that rules. So in your case, Scorpio rising, one planetary ruler is Mars, and Mars is in Leo. There's another planetary ruler, Pluto, and he's in Libra as well in your case, but let's leave that aside. The traditional rulers go just up to the visible planets, up to Saturn. So Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio, and Mars is in Leo in your case. So Mars in Leo is the captain. At best at worst a co-captain. Sorry, at worst a co-captain if you have two. Now that is I don't know what happens if you have two. I think that's difficult. They can be in clashing, but Mars is the captain of your ship. What I like, so when I do charts, this might be, I think I've done this for you. I like to include a little personal myth in the chart. And I like to think of the sun as our destination. So the sun might not represent your character profile and temperament at all, like very little, because it's basically what you are here to shine forth in this world. It's your light, but your character might be really more made up by other planets in other signs, and some people identify with their sun signs, others don't. But the sun is who you are at core. Like when you just relax and just be, what do you radiate out into the world? So it's like, and it's almost like your Shangri-La, your purpose, you're moving towards it. This is where you shine. This is where, what you want to be, what you came to be in this life. The moon is like the animal within. So it's all the instinctive reactions, and it can be a very negative place because it's where all the conditioning has happened. and we're very unconscious around our moon. It's like a fish to water. You might be in a situation what you think is normal and other people would freak out in it, but that is your moon. So moon is the animal within the instinctive reactions, and it comes naturally to you. You just do it, don't think about it. And the ascendant is the interface with the world. I like to compare it to like a fruit with the core, the skin and the flesh within. So the ascendant is where you meet the world. And in terms of astronomy, the ascendant, that in one day you have all 12 signs rising on the ascendant, whereas it takes 1 year for the sun to go around the whole zodiac, and it takes roughly a month for the moon to go around the zodiac. These are our calendar kind of things, a day, a month, a year. And the moon, the daily rhythm, the sun, the core being, and the ascendant is the how you've incarnated. It's like you've taken that soul and you've pinned it down, with 4 pins. You're going like, there you go, incarnation cross, it's called, and it's determined by the hour, the time and place of your birth, because it changes obviously from location to location. It has to do with which sign is rising in the east at the time of your birth. And that is how you incarnate, what you kind of your impetus, how you relate to the world and how you interface with others, and your whole kind of orientation in physical reality. You can't make a chart with only one of these factors. These are the most important things to be aware of, plus your chart ruler, because if it's very different from those 3, you might be missing an important puzzle. Now, I will add to this, and that's still not using any other planets. It's very, very important to look at the way these sun, moon, and earth intersect. For example, when we get eclipses, are the points where sun and moon and earth align perfectly. So the earth is blocking the light of the moon completely, and that is a lunar eclipse, a total one if it's a complete block. And then you have a solar eclipse when the moon is between the earth and the sun. So what I'm trying to say is that these points of intersection are called the eclipse points or the lunar nodes. And that's also something extremely important to look at in your chart. Stephen Forrest has done amazing work on that. And by knowing your lunar nodes, you truly come to know, I have realized by applying this technique, the incarnating purpose of the soul. Even if you know nothing else, you can come to know a lot by just looking at that. It's incredible. So, and that, as I said, is just again an interplay of sun, moon, and earth. You can think of the ascendant as the earth, since it's you're pinning yourself down onto the earth. So, yes. So I think these are them, right? Sun, moon, and earth. Sun, moon, ascendant, and the ascendant ruler, which is the chart ruler, and the eclipse points, which is the intersection of sun, moon, and earth. So even if you just know the interplay of these 3 bodies, you know a lot about yourself.
Wow, this is absolutely mind-blowing. I feel like I need to have a conversation with you constantly to understand all of this. You've told me in the past that every soul has a cycle. Tell me what you mean by that.
Don't know about souls because I study incarnated souls. So I have no idea what souls do when they're not around here. A soul comes from somewhere and is heading towards somewhere. And you can think of that as reincarnation. You can think of that as a useful story, just to delineate purpose and intent coming into the body. Or you can think of it as ancestral DNA memories. We can be agnostic about a lot of stuff and still practice astrology. You come from somewhere and it's like a lesson you've mastered. You can think about it this way, something you've done again and again and again. But it's also like a bit of a hangover, like you've overdone this bit. And you come here and you're moving towards a new experience. And this new experience you move towards is what you've come here, kind of your soul purpose in many, many ways. And it's very, very important because it's like, everything is in motion. That's the other thing, which is wonderful with astronomy. Nothing is static. Like you come in a moment in time and you kind of flow out again. Like you just want to have an experience. You want to unfold in time and with time. And so the soul comes in with intent. I think that's what you meant when you said a cycle. The soul comes in with intent and it wants to have that experience while it's here. And it's moving from the familiar to the unfamiliar, which can be very scary, but the hunger is there. Yeah, and other people often draw you towards that point.
We talked at the beginning about your relationship with time. How are you and time these days, and how do you use your time based on your astrology, what it is that you know?
Let's just take two factors. In my own chart, I'm a very fluid person. So I have a fluid relationship with time. If you want to be specific, I have Moon in my sixth house, which means that moods and needs and other people's needs and relationships and a lot of things play a part in how I manage each day. It could be different, but I have to be aware of my own natural rhythms in order to function well in time. Another factor, for example, that I know to, because we can, you have the external standards and you think, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be doing this. And at this moment in my time, I know in my internal clock that my chart ruler is Mercury, is currently retrograde. So I know that it's a time to focus inwards, and I do it consciously. There's lots of creative stuff that I'm doing and that I want to do. This is not a time when I'm very rigid with my time, put it this way. But there were times where I was much more rigid. I find that if you're rigid, you can be productive, but if you're not, you can be more creative. So the truth is somewhere in between that. I mean, you can go the other extreme, but I am allowing myself more time at the moment to just remove myself from academia. Really, the last thing I did was 2020. Got my astrology diploma in 2020, and I've started seeing clients. It's a focus inward at the moment.
Thank you so much for sharing it. It's so helpful to understand this. Tell us something that you do with your time that you don't think that other people do.
This is not to say that everyone should do it, because I'm an astrologer. So I always know the cycles. I need to know what cycle we're in. And people who read astrology, I think that's why they do it the most. Even if you don't understand the jargon, just knowing when the new moon is and when the full moon is allows you to understand that this is a time to set a new intention or make a decision. That's enough. You don't need to take action immediately. Just make that decision and do one thing to confirm to the universe that this is your intent. And then at the full moon, it's not like something extraordinary happens. The full moon is really a fullness of consciousness, a full realization of something. Things could happen in the outer world. But again, take a moment to take the message of that full moon. So I live by these cycles. I didn't always. During my time in academia, I stopped paying attention to that for a while to see if I could be without it. But I live by these cycles, and I always check to see where things are. And I don't like to live my life constantly like, oh my God, let's set up this appointment at the precise time when I think we should live life. There's no time to study it and live it at the same time. Just live. But beyond that, it's nice to know. It's great to know. It's great to enjoy the cycles of nature. So that's what I do.
I love that. I feel like we have discovered a secret superpower that we can all access, even just as you say, knowing when the new moon and the full moon comes in. And it's so funny that over the last few years, probably since 2020, we've started talking about the moon more. And I was listening to somebody explaining the moon controls the sea. So why would we think that it has no power over our lives if it can control the water that is covering, what is it, more than 70% of the planet?
And I don't know, is it 90% of our bodies? I don't even know. I mean, there's just water is life. It's the cycles of life. Definitely pushing against the current gets you nowhere. The more you attune yourself to both the cycles of nature and your own internal clock, not berating yourself, understanding yourself really helps. And there is a balance to be struck, of course. I'm sometimes guilty of too much studying. And you don't need to know astrological jargon or terminology. Astrologers use it because when you build a sentence, you just need to give evidence for what you're saying. I'm saying this because blah, nobody understands it, of course. Some astrologers might understand it, and you don't want just to talk. You're not a channeler. Astrologers do speak, they do say why they say something, but you don't need to understand that at all. It's just about tuning in to the cycle.
And you said something very useful earlier as well. It's down to how we feel. And obviously we can be productive and do it a certain way, and then we can be creative and do it another way. And that is not to say that one way is better, the other way is worse. It comes down to how do you feel in the moment. And in a world where we are just suddenly starting to remember what our feelings are, it is an interesting ride that we are all on. Which brings me on to tell us a little bit about some astrological weather. What do we have coming up? At the time of recording, we are late in 2024. What can we look forward to as the year ends? We move into the next year and the next few years. What can you tell us?
All right. First of all, let me say very briefly, human lifespan is so short. We always think we live in extreme times. I mean, who knows? We can only extrapolate from the symbols of how life was before or how it's going to be afterwards. So astrology is wonderful in trying to understand history through the lens of the model of the world. As I said, our lives are relatively short, so anything an astrologer says should be qualified a little bit by that. Most astrologers will tell you today, and I would agree, that we live in extraordinary times because people talk about the age of Aquarius for sure. And who knows, some people say it started at the start of the 20th century. Other people say it's like 100 years from now. But the point is we are in a transition period. So this might give us some reason to believe that we do live in extraordinary times. More to the point, we are now in September. We're starting a period of eclipses. Eclipses are always accelerators of events. What is wonderful to observe, and I love doing this, is as the eclipses move through the zodiac, and the eclipse points, by definition, also move through the zodiac, they can describe the direction humanity is taking. They describe where the problem lies and where the solution lies. So, for example, right now, we have been in a situation where we have been asked to be courageous and to stand up for ourselves and to not just be doormats and not just lie back and let things happen. So this is a period that we're going through now. And there's been a lot of unrest and a lot of things, which is disruptive, but is the way things should be going, not violence, of course. So you can understand that the march of time at the moment, first of all, requires us to be more heroic and stand up for ourselves. And as we move into a new cycle of eclipses, the eclipse is now moving into Pisces and Virgo, and the points follow in January. The first eclipse in Pisces is this September, 18th of September, UK time. First eclipse in Pisces, first in the series. And then in January, you have the lunar nodes joining, the points. What I want to say about that is we're moving into a very, very important time spiritually, because we're at a point in our world where there's a lot of automation, there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there is a lot of things coming through that we need to process. We need to change our systems in some way. There's a kind of bureaucratic phase we're going through it, a lot of nitty-gritty, getting bogged down into detail, a lot of perhaps division, discrimination. These are symbols of the sign of Virgo. And also it has to do with our health. The solution, which is the northern eclipse point, will be in Pisces, which is a time where we must really engage more spiritually with our lives. This is where I think we're going. This is very important. It's like a spiritual awakening we're having right now. And there's other factors as well. I focused on that for now. And at the same time, we're coming at the end of a very important cycle that was seeded with the fall of the Berlin Wall back in 1989. And it started this modern world where there was no longer an Eastern Bloc in effect. And the values, the whole socioeconomic structures and the ideals that upheld our world since then are now coming to an end. They're collapsing. And we have a birth of new world, as it were, where new ideals going to form the basis of a new world that's going to be birthed by February 2026. And so it's very important to know we are now in a transition point. And I think 2025 will be a lot like the tides coming and washing away what's no longer needed, which is why it's important to awaken spiritually so we can have an easier time of it, not get bogged down into the nitty-gritty. It's a time of letting go. It's a time we're moving into a new situation. And I'm very optimistic. It's just that, we are in this world and we live it. So we need to do the work. We need to get with it. There's no point getting depressed if you think, we're going through a time of perhaps a bit of difficulty. No, because we are active participants, and with our own mind and the opening of the heart, the more spiritual understanding of what this life is about here is really what's required now to move us to the next stage. We can be very exciting. And the third thing I'll say with a bigger picture, obviously people are talking about Pluto having just entered Aquarius, AI, transhumanism, all these things are part of that. Even space, aliens, all kinds of crazy stuff is coming through. And all this, basically, this is going to totally transform our paradigm of knowledge, of what we thought we knew. We're going to know new things, and the old things will have been proven to be false. A new paradigm, huge paradigm shift in our knowledge and understanding of the world and our place in the universe and our understanding of our physicality. Now, these new paradigms, it will take 20 years to go through Aquarius. And I have an article on my website that talks about that. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius, we had the French Revolution. Just before it ended, we had the American Revolution. Before that, we had the Reformation. And before that, we had the Scottish War of Independence. This is a time where, as a wonderful astrologer, Pam Gregory, she talks a lot about that. At the moment, we have very strict hierarchical structures like top-down controls. We're moving towards a lateral, communal brotherhood, sisterhood way of living. And of course, the battle is between the mind and the heart. Are we going to go totally like technology, or are we going to use the technology of our hearts and our bodies and our minds? The magnetic field of the heart is even larger than that of our minds. And we're just tapping into these new technologies. Frequency is basically the basis of all these things. And I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to go deeper into that. But we're going to see a lot of new technologies, and we're going to see a great awakening in consciousness. And we are going to see also fights for freedom and independence. And it might take 20 years, until we fully come out the other side. But it's an amazing awakening for humanity. And I think technology, transport, it's all going to be transformed, communications and the way we think and interact with each other. So, yeah.
It sounds incredible. It sounds like we have got a lot coming up. Every month, Ira produces astrological weather, which you can go and register for on her website. All the links are going to be left in the show notes for this episode, so nobody needs to panic. But in her astrological weather every month, she gives an overview of what she was just talking about, what is going on astrologically. What's one question you haven't been asked that you would like to have been asked?
There's many. I'm going to choose an astrological question, which is perhaps important to put on the table here, since we're saying what astrology is. People get very confused between zodiac signs and constellations. So I think I do want to say that. And even Ptolemy made the distinction 2,000 years ago. So it's not new. But the constellations are groups of stars in the sky that we have grouped together to create shapes and stuff, from ancient times. And they are of varying sizes. But the zodiac itself, why I said it's a giant clock, is loosely based on the constellations. Each sign is the same width. And you also have the most important thing of all, which is based on the seasons. So 0 Aries is always the spring equinox in the north, is always the March equinox. And 0 Libra is always the September equinox. And the solstices are always, the beginning of Cancer and Capricorn. So the zodiac we are working with is a tropical zodiac. And it's 12 months, 12 hours. So people talk about all kinds of things, about 13th sign, about constellations, about all kinds of stuff. This is a model of the world. There might be another model that's good as well, but that's the one that's been passed down to us, and it works. So it's very important not to confuse those things.
And what have you got coming up in 2024?
As I said, I'm more turned inward. Obviously, I'm always thrilled to be with clients, because it's like, a human's life story is the most exciting thing in the world to me, and trying to understand and communicate with that person, anything that will be of help with them. So I'm looking forward working with clients. What I love to do is to write, and I have projects that I want to get going writing. As I said, very inward focused life I live right now, but at the same time, working with people, I'm always available for that. This is very important to give what I have to offer.
Where is the best place for us to connect with you online?
My website, yourastrogenes.com. You can email me there. You can contact me through the form. You can also find me in the Faculty of Astrological Studies website, Consultant Astrologer, and in the Association of Professional Astrologers International website. Again, Consultant Astrologer. You can find me there.
Ira, thank you so much for your time today. It has been amazing. I can't wait to have you back on to find out more. And people, please let us know in the comments what else you would like to know. Let us know what you took away from this episode, and let us know what questions you have. Ira, thank you so much for your time today. It's been so amazing to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it. Thank you, Abigail. Doing a great work.
And until next time, my friends, remember, stay safe, stay well, and it is your time. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you loved what you heard, be sure to let me know by leaving a review so I can keep the good stuff coming. Come and say hi on Instagram at Success by Design Training, or visit my website successbydesigntraining.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Abigail Barnes. Until next time, don't forget, you are amazing and it's your time.